SampPoetry. All right, welcome everybody, and thank you for tuning in for today's episode. I'm actually really excited. This is something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and I'm just excited to do this, just to sit down with other producers, kind of get to know them a little bit more, and just kind of like their background and see how they got started with making music, their workflows. This is something that I find very valuable because me, when I was just getting started producing music, these are the type of videos or information that I would dig up for. So right now I want to kind of give back that type of content that I was in search for when I was just getting started. So today's episode is going to be with our boy SampPoetry. So this is somebody, not just because I'm right here and we're doing this interview together, but just listening to his music. It's an inspiration for me personally. And this is one of the artists that I've been really wanting to get on our episode and just kind of, just pick at his brain a little bit on to see his process when it comes down to making music. Let's jump right into it, man. Just to kind of get to know you a little bit more. How long have you been making music for?
Man, seriously, I've been making music since 1993. So
93.
I'm showing my age, but I started making music in 1993. Man, I was 10 years old, yo. From that age on, I knew what I wanted to do. You know what I mean?
That's crazy. And what got you into it? Like, what was some of your inspirations that you're just like, man, like this is when I decided I wanted to start making music?
Yeah, well, for one, I come from a musical family, man. So, on my mother's side, pretty much everybody on that side can either sing or, do something. So I was around that. And then my dad was just really big with his music. We had the ghetto blaster, man. He had the big speakers or whatever. So he used to entertain the neighborhood playing the music and all of that. So it was just always around me. And then, I was just always an artistic kid into drawing and writing and things like that. So when I discovered hip hop, it was just an easy transition. But of all people, man, because I grew up in Niagara Falls, New York. So, we had a great assortment of music coming because we're on the border of Canada. So we had, New York, but then right over the bridge is Canada. So I got influenced by a lot of music. But of all people, man, Snoop Dogg, I heard Snoop's Doggy Style album. And I started, messing around with rapping. That kind of set off me rapping. Yeah.
Is that kind of like one of your influences where you listen to and you're just like, man, I want to know more about the process of how they make these records? Because we could either listen to music and just like, hey, that song is cool. But then some of us listen to records and we're like, man, I want to know how that happened or how did they make this?
It was just just being a 90s kid. So I wasn't even curious. I wanted to rap so bad that it was leading me down paths that I didn't even know I was going to go down. So take, for instance, I work at a big studio now, but my entry into recording was, okay, I'm hearing the Snoop album and I'm trying to do my thing. And so I got a boom box and I'm trying to rap over that. So I'm recording stuff, you know what I mean? And so before I know it, I'm recording into the boom box. And so I'm learning how to overdub with the two dual cassettes, you know what I mean? And even my first beats. Crazy. I didn't have a drum machine or anything like that. I used to take like little breaks of a song. So my first technically beat was George Clinton's Atomic Dog. There's like a break part in it where it's just music playing. So I needed something to rap over. And I was, it's called pause taping. And so you take the two cassettes and you record that little break onto the other part of the cassette. And then you rewind it back and then you make this long loop. So that was my first way of making beats, without even trying. I just know I needed something to rap over. So You know what I mean?
So what kind of got you into producing was your mind at first was, man, I want to rap over something, right? Like,
yeah,
you weren't
definitely
thinking about making beats at first.
Nah, just needed something to rap over. So like I said, first it was just making those little pause loops. I was finding stuff off the radio. That's when you can tape off the radio. And I was just making these long loops. You know, it's a process, but it's what I wanted to do. The making the beat part, you know, that came out of necessity, which you hear a lot of rappers say that. A lot of producers, like some of them were like rappers beforehand.
Yeah.
And so I needed something to flow on. And, now is a great time to be an artist and a producer because it's just a plethora of producers. But back then in the 90s, equipment was really expensive. It wasn't producers on every block. It was only like one guy on my whole side of town who did beats. So if this guy was on vacation or wherever it was, you just couldn't get beats. You know what I mean? So that frustration of like, I want to make beats, man. But I didn't start making beats until I was 16. Really? Like officially making beats. And I honestly, the exact moment, I remember the exact moment I said, I'm going to make beats, yo. I used to go over these guys' houses.
What was that moment for you?
Yo,
what clicked for you where you're like, I'm going to start making beats?
This was the year 1999. So I'm 16 years old and I'm hanging out with these guys. They're like in their 20s, you know what I mean? And these guys had an MPC 2000. And I was the little guy. I would just come over and just observe, these guys. It was like, just imagine a house where it's like these two brothers and they got a plethora of friends coming through, dropping by, and everybody's jumping on the MPC. And, they had like a little booth going on, like a nice little home studio thing going on.
That's cool.
And I'm the little guy waiting to get my turn. You know what I'm saying? And so I remember one day, it's a summer day, and I'm sitting there, and this guy he's not part of the clique. He's just kind of over there making beats. And I asked him, it's just me and him. Finally, the house is kind of empty, and it's just me and this guy. And I'm like, hey, you think when you get done, he's making his beat. I said, you think when you get done, you can make me a beat? And honest to God, he looks at me and goes, no. And he keeps making beats. Yo, and I'm sitting there, I'm like, holy shit, this guy just said no. Like, you know what I mean? And so I was kind of pissed, man. I like got up and I left out, and I just remember walking out like, yeah, okay. I'm gonna make my own beats. I'm gonna do my own thing, man. And
that's cool, man.
Yeah, that was my moment, man. I got me a summer job, and I started saving up. Like I gotta make beats now, man.
Actually, last time I was talking with you, I see right now in the background, you have this huge record collection. I have a record collection myself, and my record collection is like a handful of records.
Right. Okay.
But I seen that you're surrounded by records, so I'm assuming that even before you wanted to start making beats and you were rapping and all that, you already kind of had an idea of. Were you already collecting records before you started producing, or does this happen when you started producing?
Living at home, my pops had a huge record collection. So it was like, I told you, we had the ghetto blaster. So it was like back then when you had the turntable, the receiver, the cassette player, the real big speakers. So my dad just had all type of stuff, man. Jazz, funk, blues, all type of stuff. And he used to actually sit me down sometimes and like kind of highlight stuff in the music. Like, hey, listen to those horns. Let's wait till this bass part come in. And I'm a kid. I'm going to go outside and play. I don't want to hear this stuff. But I, looking back, I'm like, man, he was training my ear to listen for stuff. You know what I mean? So when I, beforehand, and he was the type back then, man, it was like, hey, don't touch my records. I'm going to the grocery store. Don't touch my records. But like, he would leave out, man, we putting the Michael Jackson records on and, messing around. So yeah, I already had records in the house already. So that was like my first little, intro into vinyl. So, you know what I mean? When I started making beats, I had it.
So when you actually started producing and rapping, were you looking at vinyl records or just collecting records with a different year? Because now we're talking about producing and sampling. You start listening to records a lot differently. I'm assuming, right?
Yeah, definitely. So again, I was still hanging out with these guys, man. Shout out to my man Saladin, his brother Golden Sun. These guys were like just really deep. And we were at the time, man, Wu-Tang Clan was just destroying the game. You know what I mean? So we were all influenced by that. So I'm hanging with these two guys and they're making beats every day, but they were heavily influenced by RZA. So their beats were real, just off, you know what I mean? Just off balance type of beats. It wasn't like your traditional sample. Like RZA was going into like the orchestra samples and, soul samples and speeding them up, stuff that Kanye made re-popular later on in life. But RZA was doing that in the early 90s. So when I started making beats at 16, I was already just from hanging around them guys, just from listening to Wu-Tang and listening to RZA and all of that. When I started digging in the crates, that's what I was looking for. Those orchestra samples and those dark, melodic, rare samples. That's what I was doing.
So I actually have a question for you, and this is actually gold for me. I want to know this myself. When you go out to a record store, and because a lot of us, we don't have record store around us that we can just get in the car, go buy a record. When you actually do go out there and you're in an actual record shop, how do you search for music that you can sample? Are you more like you search for a certain type of era, African beats, there's Latin soul, and all these types?
Yeah.
How do you search the type of records you want to sample? Because it gets crazy.
It's definitely an art to dig in. Like I said, I've been doing the beat since '99, so that's years and years of going through that stuff. So what happens is you develop like a sixth sense. You know what I mean? It's one of those things I really wish I could put into words, but that's what happened. It's just like Steph Curry, you shoot so many jumpers, man, you can almost hit the basket without even thinking about it. But again, and I'm a 90s kid, man. I never left the 90s. And back then what we were doing was like, whereas now everything has like a similar sound, back then it was like, yo, let me try to find the most rare thing I can find. We were all trying to one up each other and trying to show what we can do. So I still have that mentality, you know, as far as let me try to find something that's just rare. You know what I mean? So when I go in, I'm not going into I hardly ever go into like the soul section. I'm not looking at like Earth, Wind and Fire and Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye. That's the records I grew up on at home. You know what I mean? So I really try to steer clear of that. And I try to find samples that kind of match my personality, man. So I'm a real laid back guy, a mellow guy. So I like easy listening stuff. I'm looking for stuff. If I see something that's like a harp, I like the sound of a harp. You know what I mean? Acoustic guitar. I love, you talk about international records. I have a gang of international records because they use instrumentation that we don't really use. You know what I mean? Yeah. And as far as like sample clearances, the more rare the record is, the harder it is for people to spot what you're using. You know what I mean? Especially if you chopping it and rearranging it. So if I get an Arabic record from the 60s, it's very hard to catch me. Whereas if I sample James Brown, you see what I'm saying? So the rarity of it, and just like I said, back in the 90s, it was like, yo, I sampled this Spider-Man record. I bet you can't, you know what I mean? So it's just, you know, so I'll go and look for children's records, you know what I mean? Just rare stuff. This stuff is like, and there's something on every record. So there's really no right or wrong way. It's just how you hear music. You know what I mean? And then also years have certain sounds to it. So you talking about like 1979, then you're gonna get into that disco stuff. You know what I mean? A lot of stuff was like, I really try to steer clear of disco.
So what era do you usually, what's your favorite era that you like to look for? 60s, 50s, 70s, 80s?
I'd say the 60s, yo. The 60s and 70s, early 70s. You know what I mean? Mid 60s to like early 70s, because especially with the 60s, they were doing stuff like where you got the drums panned hard left, and then, you know what I'm saying? And the other music. So it's real easy to just like,
you can get a lot right there.
Yeah, I can get just a bass off of this song. Like, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like they were like, or I can get vocals on this end and just music on that end. So man, you can really go in and chop out all type of stuff from 60s music just because of the way they pan stuff. You know what I mean? So man, I love 60s and 70s, man, where just the sound was just so rich and the instrumentation, and those are my favorite year time periods, like mid 60s to mid 70s.
Now I gotta ask you this, going over, like, you know, you're collecting records, and I've seen your surroundings, you got a bunch of records right behind you.
Yes, sir.
But like, how are you now? Obviously we're in a digital world where you could search for records and you know, YouTube, they got, what is it, Tracklib, or if I'm not mistaken, there's different websites that you can find records, rare records. Do you have any websites when you do, or do you even search for any samples through the internet or anything like that?
Nah, never. You know what I'm saying? And so it's no knock to anybody who does. Like, yo, get it how you live, man. It's easier, it's convenient. Some people are married or got kids and things like that, and they just don't have the time. You know, luckily for me, you know, I do have the time. You know, I travel a lot, so everywhere I go, I'm digging, and I just love holding records in my hand. I like to, you know what I mean, turn it back over. You can learn so much about music from digging, you know, with actual records, because you flip it over, you seeing years, you seeing who engineered this, who were the musicians that's playing. So what you'll start to notice is like, yo, this bass player, he played on this record. Let me go see if he has some more stuff over here. And like, you know what I mean? Really, so you can learn so much stuff. Yeah, man, really.
Man, well, so, I'm a 50-50. I'm a hybrid. You know, like you said, you know, I have my wife, my daughter. We live in a small studio bedroom. So, you know, my record collection is like a handful versus, you know, you have your whole wall full of records. And, you know, I do both. You know, I do dig up in YouTube and all that. But I've mentioned this before, and I'll say this again. It's a whole different experience when you drop that needle. Just the sound, what you get from vinyl, even if it's a dirty record. I've gotten records that I'll get for $1 and they're beat up. But even those beat up records, there's a different types of thickness that I will experience versus, you know, when I'm digging through YouTube or TrackLib. Nothing wrong with that. I do that a lot. As a matter of fact, most of my sampling is from YouTube or TrackLib, but it's a whole different experience when, if anybody is able to buy some records. And a quick thing, what I just did last time I bought a stack of records, I went on eBay and I bought like, I think it was like $10 or $15, and you get like a whole stack of records from random people, and there's gold in there. You know, I actually found a couple records right there that I was like, man, this is cool. So I understand not everybody has that luxury of being able to go down the street and you know, get some records. It's very rare now, but eBay, man, there's some pretty cool crates right there.
Man, it's I go to estate sales, man, the Goodwill, Salvation Army, people's basements. Like, you can get records. I've found records on the street, like somebody threw them out. You're like, holy shit, let me, you take them home and there's stuff on there, man. It's like,
man.
Yeah, but cool, no, man, it's no knock to anybody, man. I've sampled. I mean, I got, where I've sampled stuff around the house. You know what I mean? It's just sampling, man. So it's not a right or wrong way. I'm just faster with vinyl. So to drop the needle and, you know what I mean, and just pull another record and drop the needle, I'm just working quickly and I'm not thinking. I'm just, you know what I mean?
It's a whole different experience. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. When you're just dropping the needle versus like looking for it was a minute 2.3 versus just drop the needle, go back. It's a lot
spin it
faster.
back, you catch something, it's like, damn, I want that. You know what I mean? And like you said, the sound of it too, man, just that warm analog. I can actually hear the difference between, MP3 stuff and actual final record, you know what I mean? So it's just what my ears are accustomed to.
Yeah, anybody that hasn't experienced sampling actual record and vinyl, definitely something that I would recommend to try out. It's a different experience. And even talking about, obviously now that we're in the topic of sampling and dropping the needle and just getting different records, let's talk about your drum machine, man. What was the first drum machine you picked up, and how old were you at that time when you got your first sampler?
So it was that year, that 1999, 16. Guy says, no, I'm not making you a beat. I leave out. I'm upset. I get a Musician's Friend magazine and catalog rather, and it was a SP202, Boss SP202. It cost $300, which was like a lot for a 16-year-old. But man, I just bust my ass, man. Worked up, saved up, and got the Boss SP202. And I don't know, some of the followers may have it, but it didn't have a sequencer or nothing. You pretty much can just loop and, you know what I mean, and throw effects on it, but it really wasn't nothing else. So, but just enough to loop stuff. That was good enough for me.
Now, I've seen you with different samplers. I believe you have, obviously, you work with some MPCs. I've seen you with some Native Instruments samplers.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, so out of all the samplers, like, which one's your go-to that you would say, like, hey, if I can just pick one, this is the one that I would pick right now. And this, with these newer samplers versus back then, it's a whole different vibe. Yeah. But right now, if you could just stick with one, which one would it be?
It'd be the MPC X.
Really?
Yeah, I got the X. Man. And it's basically, I started off, after that, I progressed. My first MPC was a 2000, and I've owned several, MPCs throughout the years, but I just think they nailed it with that one as far as like all the Q links, there's a knob for everything, a button for everything. The layout is good. You can plug in mics. It has phantom power, the hinge LCD, the pads feel great. I mean, that's my favorite one, and that's what I'll stick with if I had to pick one, the X.
Oh man, yeah, because I seen you rocking with different samplers, and I'm like, man, just kind of knowing like after, even with the old school samplers versus now, that's one thing that I've actually mentioned before. My first MPC was the 2000 XL. Okay. And when I got on that, like YouTube wasn't really that big at that time. Yeah. So like, I mean, I would look for videos, but there wasn't no videos that I can find. But I feel like my love for production was different versus what it is now, because back then I found myself day and night. Again, I lived with my parents. I didn't have no kids, no wife or anything like that, no responsibilities. Right. I just made beats. And I really submerged myself into learning this machine. Again, there wasn't really that many content out there with it, but my love and my passion for it was at a whole different level versus now there's so much content out there, which I'm grateful for, but I feel like the process is just so much faster that I kind of, I don't know, my love for it is different. Do you feel similar?
Absolutely,
with
man.
that?
Absolutely. I'm like the equipment I have now and the resources I have now, I would have killed to have that back then. Now that I have it all and now the life has changed and music has changed, I'm like, it's not as, it definitely, you have to fight for inspiration nowadays. Whereas back then, man, I remember my pops used to have to like threaten me just so I can come down and eat. Like he sent my brothers and I'm like, hey, tell Sam to get out of that room. All day long, man. That's all I cared about was just beats, man. Like I didn't want to do nothing else.
You see that right there, what you just said right now, like I saw myself right there. And I'm sure a lot of the viewers watching this, like we don't have to know each other physically, like to be right in front of each other. But like, I know that feeling. Like I'm so familiar with that feeling because I've had the same experience too. Where like, man, this kid's in the garage all day, just making beats. I didn't care about anything other than I have to go to school tomorrow and that's it. You know, that's like I can just continue to make beats, man. So that's so cool, man. Now talking about producing beats and all that stuff. One question, like with your workflow, I know some people are different and it could be different in every beat that you produce, but how's your workflow look like?
It changed throughout the years, but where I'm at now, what's comfortable for me, you know, I've been doing it for so long, is I'm like a chef, man. So I have about maybe 5 or 6 kits that I made from sampling like kicks and snares and hi-hats from different records. So I have like 5 folders of like stuff I made, you know what I mean? That these drum sounds, I know they sound good no matter what. They're going to work good with the sample-based material I use. Then I have a bass key group that I made from sampling one of my friends' actual like live basses. So I got this bass that just works with everything I use. I have these kicks and snares and hi-hats that I created myself that works good. So those are like my ingredients. I always have those ready when I'm ready to make a beat. So then from there, the hardest part is just finding a sample, finding something I want to sample. Once I find that sample, something that's good, got a nice vibe to it, I'll sample it, I'll chop it up, but I may not know what I want to do yet. So I'll go to those drums. I get those drums rocking. I'll start with a nice drum, groove I got. I may change it, but I'll start with a nice groove and get those locked in. From there, I'll add the sample and start chopping around to playing it around to that drum sound I have. Boom. Once I got that, I already know the bass is going to work. You know what I mean? So now I'm just playing. So I just kind of created a system. So a lot of times with producers, man, there's so many gigs of drums and things, you know what I mean? I recommend that any producer kind of get you some go-to sounds so that you're not that, because you can lose inspiration taking too long to make a beat. You know what I mean? There's so many samples and packs and things out there. So I just have like a set amount of sounds. I can always switch them out sometimes. Sometimes I may go to a Marco Polo kit or a Black Milk kit or something like that if I just want to, but I definitely keep a set of drums that I'm like, these are going to work. I love this bass sound right here. Let me find my sample. I'm off to the races. I'm dropping the needle, sample, chop it. Now I'm just playing. You know what I'm saying? And that's pretty much my workflow.
Man, I'm glad you mentioned that because it's somewhat similar to what I do as well. And I've always said this before on some of my videos where I'm like, kind of have a go-to sound or a go-to a drum kit or even drum breaks. I'm huge with drum breaks because inspiration is what it's about when you're getting started, because when you lose that initial inspiration that you have in the first few minutes when you're sampling or you're starting a track, you don't get that back later. So I've always preached that on like, man, have like a go-to drum break or have some go-to drums. It doesn't matter. You can get freaky with it later on. You can switch it up and get all fancy with it. But in the beginning, just have something going. Just so when you are chopping up samples and you are slicing up, pitching down, you're just kind of going based off of your inspiration in the first few minutes. Because again, that's something if you lose, and that's happened to me before, where I'm sampling a record, I'm listening to it, I listen to it again, and it distractions, and I'm like for 30 minutes on the same part. I'm just like, man, I don't even know what I heard in the beginning. I'm lost right now. So now with your bass, you said you have like a few key groups of bass sounds, or do you usually like to filter out some of the samples that you work with that already have bass lines behind them?
Yeah, mainly I have one bass, literally. I've had people trying to buy this bass off of me. Like,
funny.
I'm like,
that's all you need, right?
I got one bass, but it's it's no magic to how I did it or anything like that. I just sampled one bass note. I have a friend, shout out to my homegirl, Fee. She plays bass. We amped it up, and I just tweaked the amp and got the sound I wanted. Nothing special. I didn't add any effects or compression or anything. I just got a tone I liked. and sample that one note.
I got to stop you right there, because one thing that stands out to me from your production is your bass sound. So I don't know if it's that bass that you're talking about, but when I hear your videos, and sometimes I'm scrolling through, even if it's through my phone speakers, like your stuff knocks when it comes down to your bass. And that's something that I've always admired of like just sound quality in general, not just production, but sound quality is a whole different topic right there. But something that cuts through the speakers with your production has been the bass that you choose. I mean, I don't know if it's that bass sound that you're talking about, but it definitely rocks.
It's the bass. It's not. And I struggled with my bass for years. For one, even just learning how to play the bass on, because I'm not trained or anything like that. But years of doing it, you develop a sense of what keys. And nowadays I tell people, just hit the note. If it don't sound right, it's not right. You know what I mean? I don't even think anymore. But it was something about, I look at, making beats like clothing. You know what I mean? That's like if I'm wearing an army fatigue, I'm not going to put dress shoes with that. You know what I mean? Well, nowadays people probably do that. But you know what I mean? But if you're wearing a suit, you don't want to put Timberlands with that. You know what I mean? So I was having these dirty samples, these dirty drums, and then I'm using synth basses, and it just wasn't meshing well to me. And I was like, damn, I gotta figure this out, man. And so I just started studying my favorite producers and what they do. And two people to stick out for me, which I love so many producers. We'll be here all day, but my favorite producer is Knots. You know what I mean? Knots is the best producer. Okay, I mean, of course, Jay Dilla is my ultimate favorite producer, but rest his soul, but living is Knots, hands down, man. And one thing that sticks out to me with Knots is his bass lines. It's just crazy. You know what I mean? I just listen to so much of his music and like, man, how does he do that? And another guy is Kev Brown. You know what I mean? Big shout out. I've met the brother and hung out with him a couple of times. And he's a real humble dude. And he gave me pointers on how he achieved, because his bass lines are sick too. I've had people asking me, yo, does Kev Brown do your bass lines? Or, yo, where'd you get that? Like, yo, never in life, you know what I'm saying? But I got to give it up. The brother definitely, my first time meeting him, he was just like, yeah, all I did was, sample a bass note, you know what I mean? And I'm just using the 16 levels. I'm like, holy shit. Okay. And so, of course, I never want to take what these brothers are doing, but I did want that good bass sound. Like, how do I get that? So I just felt like those audio companies, I just couldn't get it with VSTs and stuff like that. So again, I'm not trying to bite. I was like, man, how can I make my own bass sound? Something that I would like, and you know what I mean? So where it'll mesh well with a sample. And so, I just got in there one day with my homegirl Fee, and she just was playing, and I'm like, yeah. And I was just tweaking the amplifier, until I got, and then when we got it, I was like, I like that. And I just sampled it in, man. And it was like the heavens opened up. Like every time I add that bass to something, it takes it to another level. But aside from that, I'm still old school. So I will sometimes, a sample got bass in it already. So I'll filter that bass out, man. You know what I'm saying? Or you were mentioning, we talked off camera, the beat where I sampled Pink Floyd. And you know what I mean? Yeah. That sample is pretty much a bass track. So all I did was I chopped those bass notes and just played it my way.
That's one of my favorite beats that you do. Like every time I watch that video, I'm like,
thank you,
man. Like,
thank you, man.
That right there hits really hard. Now that one, so you filtered out the Pink Floyd.
I didn't even filter it. I just chopped it and I just played, because it's basically starting to
it's the bass.
So I just chopped those bass notes and replayed them. So sometimes that's a blessing too, because now I'm getting a real, bass from whatever year that was made. You know what I mean? So I love that if I'm going to sample records and it starts off like a solid bass by itself, like soloed out, oh yeah, I'm chopping that. I'm not even going to my bass note. I want that bass. So that was just one of those lucky times.
I feel the same way though, because when I'm working with sample-based production and then I bring in some synthesizers, some like VSTs, like a lot of the times I want to do my best to make it match, because I want to pretend like, oh man, I put some keyboard playing into the sample-based production, but realistically, I'm like, I don't know. It's just not exactly what you said. You got like some grimy stuff, and then you got some VSTs, even though they have like some vintage sound, supposedly. Right. Like it just, I don't know. It just does not marry well, and I've noticed that. I actually just recently picked up a small little Mavis synthesizer, and I've never experienced analog synthesizers, but when I connect this small little thing, it was like $300 and it's super lightweight. But as soon as I heard like the sound of it, I was
Yeah.
like, shoot, I've never heard anything like this with actual
Nice.
VSTs.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sure there's some great VSTs out there.
Yeah, there's
but
stuff you can add. And
it's a whole
sometimes I
different
will
experience.
add synths to it and stuff. You know what I mean? It depends. Every beat is different, but and then again, I'm still old school method. So let's say I'm making a beat and I want some strings. Instead of going to the VST, I go to my record collection and I'm going to find an orchestra record. I'm gonna chop strings.
Yeah.
So some of my beats are people liking it, not realizing it's a combination of like 5 different records.
Really?
You know what I mean? Yeah. So I have like strings from this record. I may say, yo, I want a horn sample. So I'll go to my jazz section and it takes a while. So I'm playing that beat and I'm going through dropping the needle on horn sections and I'll find a melody from there. So I'll put that in there and then I'll find a vocal sample. Somebody's like I'll go to a gospel record and get a ooh and a ah, chop that off and put it in. So now it's like, it's this big collage of sounds. And I got strings here. I got a vocal sample here and it just meshed, man. And it's just, I could have easily went to a VST and found those sounds, but it's nothing like, I sampled a real trumpet. You know what I'm saying? I sampled a real, orchestra sample. And then you put that all, sometimes you got to pitch it up and down to make it sound like in key, sounding key. But
when you're doing that, when you're blending, this is a question I get asked so much. Like I have no idea how many times I've gone asked this, but when when you have one loop, right? You have in your sequence, let's say you have a sequence, you have a sample chopped up, and then you say, you know what, I want to grab some horns. So you go into your record collection. It might be a whole different pitch, a whole different key. What's like your method of matching the pitch to the same key? Do you use just by ear, or I know with the new updates in the MPCs, you can actually see the key that your sample's at, and then you can kind of match it.
I just go by ear, you know what I mean? And again, it's not, anybody can do it, you know what I mean? It's not, because like I said, it may not be in key. So I made, if I'm doing something like a little 90s boom bap sound, I just need a, you know what I mean? I got the note. I already got the one little solid note I need. And from there, I'm just going to pitch it. And I tell people, use your ears, man. If it don't sound right, it's just not right. If it does, I don't care what some music professor says. If it sounds right, it's right. So I'll take that little thing and add a delay on it. So it's like, you know what I mean? So it's not really any method, man, but I'm just going off ear. And then sometimes it's like a melody it's playing. When you drop in those needles, sometimes it just falls in key. Like shit, I don't have to do anything to it. It just, I got so many records. I'm just dropping the needle and it falls on in key that I'm like, all right, great. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. I actually love. I use a little bit of both. I look at the key, like I detect the key. I go to my program editor and then I see what key that loop is at that I'm using. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed this as well, where once I want to add like another part or another clip from another record, I will try to match the key, and I'm like, hey, it's the same key, but it will sound a little off. So I notice that it could be a hit or miss. So I kind of do a hybrid. I try to match the same key, but even though I notice it's still a little off, at least it gets me close enough where like, all right, I could just pitch it up or down a few semitones and get it pretty close. So I use a little bit of both, but I notice, man, like having a good ear to match a key is a gift, because some people, no offense, but like there's some people that will be like, no, I'm in key, but it's like, no, you're not in key. and that happens to me a lot, man. I've heard some beats where I'm like, yeah, man, like that's in key, and then I listen to it the next day, I'm like, that's so off, man.
Same here. I'm no guru, man, and honestly, it's just to this day, man, I practice daily. You know what I mean? It's just practice. So I got stuff when you go back and listen, like, oh yeah, that's definitely not in key. You know what I mean? But for the most part, you just develop that sense of doing it, and even on the turntable itself, there's a pitch slider, so I'm able to do sometimes slide it up and down too and get it as close as I can. And what I love, honestly, I can pretty much try to make anything match. I like having like isolated instruments. You know what I mean? If I find if it's a guitar player and it's going bloom, 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 I'm like, oh, I'm about to kill that, because now I can cut those notes and I'll make it go in key. You know what I mean? Whereas I don't really like to sample stuff that got too many elements going at once. So it's like vocals is on there, drums.
It gets really complicated.
Yeah, I mean, I can do it, but like I like where it's like just the strings by itself, where I got the vocals. You know what I mean? Or sometimes I'll just start off with the piano notes and I'm like, oh yeah, I can chop that. And then from there you can pitch up and pitch down. You can make it go in key. You know what I mean? Once it's not that many elements. Yeah, man. It's just, what I mean?
This is the type of stuff that makes me want to jump into my MPC right now and just start making music, man. But That's something that gets very challenging. I notice that when you have too much elements going on, you sample that and you're trying to match the key with another record that has a bunch of elements in there.
Yeah.
It's like, oh man, it gets so, it's a challenge, you know, and that's the fun part for some people. Some people love that challenge of like, I don't want it too easy. I kind of want to figure it out. And that's where it gets very interesting. But yeah, man, it's a whole different ball game right there, trying to match different records. Speaking about different records, I actually want to jump in to your record collection, because from what we know is that you've actually grabbed from all these years of you collecting records and having that experience that you have of listening to different types of records all over the world. You've actually have a collection that you've put together into a sample pack, right?
Yes, sir.
I want to know more about this, because when you actually send me this sample pack, I was actually surprised when I opened it, because this is gold right here, because it's something that I was like, are you sure you're going to share this, man? Like there's some really good, there's some really good sample packs that you have right there. But how did this come together after how many years of you collecting so many records that you said, you know what, I'm going to put this together? You have drum breaks, and then you also have melodic samples that you've collected, correct?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So, honestly, I have like over 3,000 records, man. So you see in back of me, but man, my basement is filled with records. This records underneath this desk over here, man. I got records all over the place, man. So tons and tons of samples. And, I dig weekly, you know what I mean? So, I travel a lot. Any city I go to, that's the first place I'm going is the record stores. And, I didn't plan on doing a sample pack or anything like that, man. I was just getting so many requests though. I was getting compliments on my beats, but my DMs, people like, yo, where you get that sample from? You know what I'm saying? I don't know, all my diggers can tell you, man, like back in the 90s, asking somebody, where'd you get your sample was like asking a man, like, what kind of boxers do you got on right now? You know what I mean?
You don't ask
It was just like, don't never in your life ask me where I get my samples. It was so like a hidden thing.
That's why when I heard your stuff, I was like, you sure you gonna do this?
Bro? But I was getting so many people like, where do you get the samples from? And then there was people like, hey man, can you sell me some samples? I'll buy samples from you. They were like, you know what I mean? So I'm like, really? Like I couldn't, I had never even like, thought of it like that. You know what I mean? I'm just doing beats, what I got going on. So I was getting so much requests, and I'm like, shit, it's like from a business standpoint, like, this is demand. You know what I'm saying? Believe it or not, I put together that for just let you guys know, I have a kit called a sample pack called Poetic Crates. So that's 101 samples that I sample from, various stuff, man, soundtrack stuff, children's records, international stuff, gospel, blues, all type of stuff that's in this pack. And they're labeled. So, with the name of the artist and the song I got it from, which if you sample like I do, man, it's so easy to make beats and be like, yo, where did I sample this from? So when you guys get that pack, man, it's like, yo, that part of the job is done. And I trimmed off the fat. I got right to where I sampled what I would sample, you know what I mean? So I just made a whole collage of that type of stuff. And man, I was just inspired, man, as far as, it was just such a big demand that I was like, yo, I got thousands and thousands of records. It's nothing to give away 100 of them. You know what I'm saying? I have thousands more. You know what I mean?
You could definitely, and that's actually one thing that I was going to say. Thank you for that, because it's something that you put out to the world where I'm a big fan of this. Like I'm a huge fan. There's people that produce music for different reasons. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. I simply love the art. I really love this art. I love listening to music. I enjoy when I listen to something that inspires me. And when I'm going through your sample pack, I'm just like, man, like we need more of this. And that's something that I'm grateful for when people put stuff out like that I'm just like, this is full of value, not just for one person, but for different people. Yo, this is the type of stuff that I would listen to, and like I would sample that there too. So
that's the way I intended it.
Yeah, man, that's what
awesome, I wanted to do, man. It's like it was like going digging with me, you know what I mean? So again, I didn't put stuff that I wouldn't use, man. I'm the same way, man. I'm so passionate about the art. Anytime I'm presenting anything, I try to put my best foot forward. So, when you gave me that compliment, man, it really meant the world, because I'm also a big fan of your work, your channel. You know what I'm saying? So, thank you. I gave the people something that I would use, and I just figured, like, we all hear samples different. So what you would do with those samples, I wouldn't do it that way. You know what I mean? And some guy in another part of the world hears music. Some guy maybe in the southern region may say, I'm gonna make this more trap sounding, you know what I mean? So we are gonna hear those sounds differently. And then as far as the so we got poetic crates, that's 101 samples, and then there's poetic breaks. And so there's tons of drum break packs. I'll shout out to your sample drum break pack. I can't wait to dive into that. And then as far as the classic stuff like Impeach the President and all of that stuff and Funky Drummer, that stuff is out there. But I go digging for like rare stuff. You wouldn't believe what stuff is like, it's a kid's record. Like, they got a break on it. You know what I'm saying? Or like, this gospel sample.
I heard your stuff. And when I was going through some of your breaks, I was like, I don't think I've ever heard any of these. There's probably like one that sounded familiar, but there's so much in there. And I'm just like, I've never heard any of this. Now, you can definitely tell that is recorded from vinyl versus something that you just recorded from YouTube and put it in a pack. So it's something that you kind of feel the quality in there.
Yeah, I just wanted to keep, and I kept them raw. I didn't do any. I just, I left the hiss on there. I left the crackle because when when you take something from the poetic crates sample pack and then you mix it with that break, it's gonna mesh. You know what I'm saying? And so some of that stuff, man, I got like a gospel one in there that's. You go on Discogs, you're not gonna find this, It's just it's so rare, There's another break I got in there. I was in Amish country digging, you know what I mean? And I found this break that's really, really rare for $2. And I went on Discogs just to see, and there's only one other record, like someone else has it, you know what I mean? So I just wanted to, get you some sounds where it's like, man, it's not your just run of the mill sounds, but I'm excited about it, man. And I'm gonna make more volumes of them too.
All right, brother. So that's awesome, man. Thank you so much for, taking the time and just hanging out with me right here. Not only just hanging out with me, but just sharing your input with everybody watching this. It's a huge blessing. I'm a big fan of doing stuff like this because for myself, I'm going to be selfish real quick. I learned a lot and I'm just taking in some information from you. And honestly, I'm going to try a couple of the stuff out as soon as we're done. So huge thank you for you. And also let us know. I know you don't only produce music, but you also have a few tracks out there that you actually write and record. So let us know some of the projects that you have, any links where we can find your stuff.
Yeah, definitely, man. Yeah. So again, I just want to thank you for, having me on. And as far as music, man, we talking about the production, but I'm still an artist. I still do music or whatever. So man, you guys, I have my own YouTube channel, SampPoetry TV. So that's where you'll find, music videos of mine. You look up SampPoetry on all the streaming platforms. I got stuff out. My last thing I released was during the pandemic, a joint called Sweet Nothings. That's something that's, nice little smooth joint. You know what I mean? You got your married situation. So it's something you with your lady, you know what I mean? You could just vibe out real smooth.
That's right.
Man. And my music doesn't have any profanity, man. I don't really promote violence in my music. So it's something that you can play around your kids and all that. So definitely look out for the, Sweet Nothings. That's on on all the streaming platforms. I did do an album, what was that, 4 years ago called Poetic Dope. So that's out there. You see my parents on the cover of that. You know what I mean? That's something I'm really proud of. And that was, produced by me. I got some good people on there. What else we got going on? SampPoetry.com is where you can get beats. Anybody want to license the beats or buy beats, we got that site up and running. And also the sample kit is the sample packs is on the SampPoetry.com website.
Yeah, man. I'm going to leave a link down in the description. So make sure you guys check out the links that I'll have down there. And also do not sleep on the sample pack. It's full of gold, full of gems. It's an honor to have you right here. Again, a big thank you from me and anybody else watching this. I know we'll all appreciate this moment that we just had right now. Being able just to hang out and share these conversations is a huge plus for the community. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time with me, brother.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate that, man. You know what we doing.
That's right.